Good evening, everybody. I hope everyone can hear us all right. And welcome to the most recent in our series of updates for fans. As usual, we're going to start off with 15-20 minutes of just discussion from us, covering various areas of things that are going on at the club, and then we will move to the questions that have come in. So, Mark.
Yep, good evening, everybody. What I want to do is just to start, as usual, with some perspective. Because I think that's very important. You know, sometimes people lose perspective, and the first thing I want to talk about is the fact that there's always the long term and the short term, and we run this club trying to achieve a balance between the long term and the short term. Fans are interested in the current season, obviously, and that's what it's all about. And in fact, you know, they're interested in, if you look what's going on at the moment, in the last two games, but we're interested and focused on the next 2,500 games, the next 50 years of the club. And it's an important point to take in mind. There was a question that came in which really summarises this and probably articulates it for people in a way that you realise that the trouble or the balance that we have to strike on a day-to-day basis. And the question was this: is Mickey Mellon the right guy to develop players, basically? And the answer to that is, if you look at it, you will understand where the problem comes in terms of short term versus long term, because everybody wants success on the pitch. But in the meantime, we also want to develop players at this club. So is Mickey the right guy? He rightly tries to get success on the pitch. A few years ago, what we were doing in terms of recruitment was getting in people like Perkins, people like Macca, etc., tried and trusted, who actually gave us short-term success on the pitch, but not long-term success. So that's the balance that you see. You expect your manager to be winning things, but also we're asking him at the same time to develop players, which is a very, very difficult balance. I'll come back to how successful that is when we deal with some of the things like the window and the squad that we have. Currently, the average age of the squad is 24, 25. It's dropped down from 27, 26, 27. And a bit of news there in terms of development and the future, as it were. I can tell you tonight that we're very pleased that Charlie Jolly has signed an extension to his contract and will be here next year and potentially for the year after that as well. So in terms of perspective, bearing that in mind, let's look at the current season. We're all disappointed with 14th, but there's still a lot to play for this season. We're currently 4 points off the playoffs. In 21-22, Bristol were 10 points, were 14th and 10 points off the playoffs. And in 2021, Bolton were 13th and 7 points off the playoffs, both of those teams achieving automatic promotion. And indeed, this time in 18-19, when we got promoted, we were 10th and 5 points off the playoffs. And last year, at this point in time, you remember that we were actually second in the league and we didn't make the playoffs. Our last home game, we beat the top of the league, Leyton Orient. So, there's a lot to play for. And once again, I'd say to everybody, look, you expect the players to go the full 90 and, you, the fans, can you go the full 90 with us? Can you go the full season with us and support what we're doing? That's especially after the January window. And if I just touch on the January window, I think everybody would understand we have a stronger squad, a more balanced squad, and I think at the start of the season we explained, and I also explained recently in a programme with the BBC that there are difficulties in trying to get yourselves, because of where we are as a League Two team. People come to us who were last in the food chain to get things, and we have to wait until quite late in the window. We did that. And we brought in Turnbull just before the season started because he wanted to go to League One. And if you're looking for quality players, that's what you have to try and do. And then as we also signed Simu on the last day of the transfer window. Again, he was looking to go to the Championship and he came to us. So you have to be a bit patient with that. But actually, at the same time, we had those injuries to players, which then caused us to recruit in certain areas that we tried to rectify over the course of the January window. So we had to do that. I think we have a stronger squad, as I say. Just in terms of the financials on it, we made £75,000 net of fees coming in for players, etc., all of which was put back into the playing budget. And I think this is important. This was the first time since I've been here that we've actually had players who are worth some money in the squad. Other than things like when you obviously had Norwood, how can I forget him? But people offered us an amount of money for him when he was coming out of contract at the end of the season, but I decided that I'd rather keep him because he meant more to us on the pitch. And that is a point that I just want to make about this window, because despite the fact that we had players, and I'm talking of a number of players, not just the 2 players you're probably thinking of, but we had a number of players where people put offers in for them, and the total of those offers, and we turned down those offers, was £500,000. So we'd rather keep those players and invest in, if you like, the rest of the season. So we kept the squad together as best we could for a strong run in. And that's despite the fact, and this is an important point to note, and we'll pick it up to some extent in the finances later on, we will make a loss. And whenever we make a loss because we are supporting the playing budget. And, with one stroke of the pen or a few strokes of the pen with a number of players, we could have reduced that loss by £500,000, but we didn't. And the consequence of that is that Nicky and I will both put our hands in the pocket and put that money back into the club to ensure that we can continue to exist despite losses that we'll make this year. That's what you call an investment. And again, the balance between the short term and the long term, we think in the long term, we know what we want to be trying to do, but in the short term, we're prepared to accept those losses if it keeps us competitive for the second half of the season. Can I just then touch on something that regrettably I feel the need to touch on, and that is the anti-social media. It's a modern problem. All clubs have it. In fact, all society has it, especially in this difficult time. But first, to keep perspective, and I would like to say that Nicky and I respect and value the support from the majority of the SWA, and we do. So whilst I will say a few words about the social media or the anti-social media, you should understand that really we are very grateful and pleased about the support that we get, and lots of people write in. And despite the fact that Nicky's come off social media, come off Twitter, people have been very good in terms of supportive in terms of that. But just to give you some kind of indication as to the types of things that we get on a regular basis. I as I say, I keep my Twitter account open, but that's for send rather than read. So I just try to send messages out. This is something that came in last night. We've been working hard on quite a lot of things at the club till quite late in the day, and at 10:30 last night, this came in, and it's headed up asset strippers. And Paul, I won't say your second name, but if you want to text me now or do anything, send me a message. I'm happy to say who you really are. We know who you are, and we know that you've been banned from the club, and that may be part of the motivation for this. The other alternative, as I say, it came in about 10:30 at night, so I'll give you the benefit of that and assume you'd had a few pints, but this is what we got. Hi, I would just like to ask you why you are asset stripping the club. Firstly, the memorial ground, for God's sake. It's the memorial ground to the fallen. All you care about is money. Then you move the training ground to Beirut, all bombed out buildings and slums. And then the golden asset, the ground. You want us to move to a shoebox in the deepest pits of Birkenhead, where a cat with a tail is a visitor, or whatever that means. We all know the chairwoman hates our fans, and you think giving a computer chat room to the geeks will appease us. Leave now. We don't want you at our club, and take the worst cheap option manager we've ever had. We all know that once you have the money from the sale of the ground, you'll be off back to the beach with your slush fund. Signed off, Paul. Very kind. If I just mention that, so in terms of asset stripping, the only asset stripping that's been done here, Paul, is that we've put £5 million into the club. We never take out a penny, and we work 24/7 trying to move the club on. In terms of asset stripping, the club actually has a lot more assets than it's ever had, in as much, and those assets are in a lot better shape than they ever were. instead of training on a farmer's field, you now have a championship standard club, a championship standard training ground, which is very attractive to a lot of players who actually come. And as an ex-player, I know that's your place of work, and it's quite important. We've invested about £4 million into that at this point in time. And then you're looking at the ground itself here, which has been refurbed extensively, and you've got one of the best pitches in the league. Just look at some of the FA Cup ties at championship clubs and look at their pitch and look at ours, and you'll see that, in fact, assets, rather than being taken out of the club, have been built up over that period of time. The memorial ground, when you couldn't actually go anywhere on it to have any memorial, there is now a memorial that's actually in Hamilton Square that we contributed to make sure that that was there. And actually, in terms of the memorial ground, just to tell you, that was a contract that was signed before I came in. It was flawed in many ways, which I had to rectify, and actually didn't comply with what they were proposing to do with the EPPP and the academy, etc., and so forth and so on. So in terms of the memorial ground, I think we dug the club out of a hole on that one and used the proceeds wisely in terms of putting a replacement in place, which more than accommodates the requirements of the academy system. And then all you care about is money. Well, I've just told you that £500,000 we could have got out of the transfer window was actually put back into the club. Oh, sorry, it wasn't put back into it, wasn't taken out of it. We didn't sell the players. And so we will fund those losses. We moved the training ground. Well, actually, yes, we moved it to what is a championship standard. The ground itself, you say that we will move off and sell the ground, take the money. Well, say we get £10 million for the ground, and the next ground, the new ground we're going to take, may cost £70 million. So just try and work that out, where you're going to get the £70 million from. Well, certainly those £10 million would come in quite useful, so I don't think we'll be walking away with that in any shape. And then you say things like, you have the temerity to say, we all know. Who's we? Is that you and your mates in the pub? And you actually say, we don't want you. Well, that's we again. And you're saying, leave now. Well, when I'm taking advice from you at 10:30 in the evening, I will actually be at the stage where I'm ready to sort of turn my toes up. Once you've got the money from the ground, you're going to go and onto a beach. Well, I don't like beach holidays as it happens, so I won't be doing that. But Paul, thank you, and as I say, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt that you were coming out the pub when you sent that email, and that the motivation may have been the fact that you've been banned from this club in the past. But thank you for that. I think it's important to say that everybody has a right to an opinion, and the fans more so than most. Whether it's ill-educated, whether it's ill-conceived, so what? It's an opinion. But you sometimes see that these guys on social media mistake the fact that the right to an opinion gives you a right to abuse or lie. And I won't tolerate that. Suffice it to say that, for all those people who keep coming to us and saying, don't worry about the social media and it's terrible and disgusting, etc. I thank you for that, and Nikki thanks you for that, and thanks you very much for the supportive communications that we've had. But as far as I'm concerned, it's an irritation. It's no more than that. And social media, unfortunately, social media gives a platform for ill-informed opinion and to control a false narrative. And it's important to note that we don't have the time to sit down and dispute every single thing that comes out as fact when it isn't true. And you've just seen in that email that's been sent out, hopefully you will see how hopelessly detached from reality that is. So because we don't have the ability, the time, or the inclination at this point in time to go back and refute every single time somebody's saying something on social media, it becomes almost a fact. And that's what I hate most of all about it. So Nikki's had to shut down her account, which is a pity, because I think what she did, and everybody accepts it, and people around the game accept it, it was a fantastic way in which we tried to communicate with fans. And so instead of that, the other fans, the good fans, are going to lose out on that. Because what happens with all these people on social media is they try and intimidate people who have the temerity to have a different opinion to them, and they use terms like happy clappers, etc. So anyway, it's enough of them. As I say, it's an irritation. Unfortunately, it comes with the territory these days, and the trick is not to let it influence what the way that the club is run, and I can assure you that it doesn't. And remember that what we do here is for the majority of the fans, not for those guys. Anyway, that's my rant for the night. I'll now pass over to Nikki, who'll just talk briefly about the finances.
Yeah, we just wanted to update some people. Obviously, finances are a concern for everybody at the moment. They're a concern for clubs, they're a concern for supporters. When we came into the club, we said what we were trying to do was to make the club financially self-sustainable. And we defined that at the time as being able to have a competitive budget. A top third budget was what we were aiming for, so that we can be competitive in any league we were playing in and still at least break even as a club. Just before COVID, we'd got there. We were breaking even at an operating level. We had a competitive budget, so we had done it. We've then had the triple whammies hit us of COVID, the war in Ukraine and the cost of living crisis, which has been a bit of a nightmare. We just had out yesterday a document from the EFL looking at costs across the whole of the Football League, and they were saying staffing costs have risen 27% this season. We did put season ticket prices up last year, but it nowhere near even covered the increase in the national minimum wage last year for the matchday casual staff, let alone any other costs. This year sees the national minimum wage go up again by another 10% or so, roughly 10% in April. Hospitality salaries have gone up even more than that because it's very difficult to find staff in the industry. There's a big shortage. Energy costs, fertiliser costs, food costs, you're seeing it all at home. It's exactly the same for us. Everything is shooting up. Our costs are higher than some because the stadium is very old. It means we constantly have things breaking that need to be renewed and replaced. We have virtually no insulation in the whole building because of the way it was constructed, and it's almost impossible to retrofit it now. But despite all of that, we have maintained a competitive budget this season. As we've said before, I think in the last Q&A, we believe it's a top half budget in this division. There are a couple of people spending a lot of money and getting some results with it this year, like Leyton Orient and Stevenage, but we believe we're in the top half. But the decision to do that, as Mark said before, means we will make a loss this year. And that was a conscious decision because we wanted to make sure that we had a good budget and a squad that could be competitive. But what does that mean in reality, and the decision not to sell our best players in the window? The reality, as Mark said, is we are having to put the money in at the end of the month to pay the wages. And as much as, even with the best will in the world, we don't have the kind of wealth to carry on doing that indefinitely. So the reality of that is, unless there is somebody who comes along who is prepared to just keep writing cheques, ad infinitum, the old sugar daddy model, as indeed Peter Johnson was generous enough to do for many years, what we have to do is to get back to making the club financially self-sustainable. And that is what we're focused on doing. And that's why we put a focus on growing some of the other commercial areas, which may not in themselves be very interesting to a lot of you. The international business, the esports business, the campus expansion project. The reason we're doing these is not because we think they'll be of enormous interest to Tranmere fans, but because they are the things that we have to do to make sure that this club gets back to a break-even point as quickly as possible. The only other source of doing it is the fans, and nobody wants to go down that route. So in summary, keeping to the plan of a financially self-sustainable model is what we set out to do. It is what we are still doing, and we will stick to that unless and until there is somebody who comes along who wants to be a benefactor for the club. So that's the end of the sort of set piece bits that we want to do this evening. I think hopefully that will have answered some of the questions that have been sent in, but now we're going to move over to the questions. And if these sound quite a number of them negative, that's because I've deliberately chosen the ones that are critical by and large, because otherwise we'll get accused of ducking the issues. So I think the first one Mark's already dealt with, which is Mickey Mellon the right one to take us forward with a development model?
Yeah, Ryan Randalls, can I just say that I've just seen one of the things come through, so I'm a bit of a disappointment to you because I'm on Diet Coke. Well, don't judge everything by its label, mate. I might have actually slipped the odd whiskey into this before I came on. But listen, I was watching some of the things come through, and there's a lot of them that's gone through there in terms of Mickey Mellon. Is he the right man to take us forward with a development model? Is he the right man, full stop, to take us forward, etc., etc. I always watch the videos that the footage that Mickey does before or after games, and by and large, apart from some of the suggestions as regards playing budget, which I think can be interpreted both ways. It could be an absolute statement of fact that people like Stockport have spent a lot of money on players, or it could be taken as a fact that we're not supporting him with a budget. Apart from that particular issue, I tend to agree with him in a lot of cases when he talks about what the match has been like and his substitutions. When I don't agree with him, I will speak to him about those, and I'll ask him questions as to why that's the case. In terms of where we are specifically, I would never give the manager a vote of confidence, because I always remember the manager of Chelsea saying that whenever Ken Bates gave him a vote of confidence, it felt like he was standing on the edge of a cliff. So I think that the issue with Mickey, if you just look at the logic of it, we've gone through what I think is a pretty good window. You've got to give these players a chance to bed in, because they're slightly different to the ones that we had, so they will be changing the pattern of play. I'm pretty pleased with some of the ones that have come in, so it would be illogical to really sort of take the manager out in the short term as regards not giving him a chance to get the players that he brought together through the window to show on the pitch. So I think in terms of that, and as I said, I answered the question as regards with Mickey and development. It's always a balance between getting those results on the pitch, but also recognising the fact. If we go back to the window, we went young this season, and I remember saying at the start of it, one of the things that happens with a young side is inconsistency. And again, if you look at it, we've strengthened the team. Okay, we've lost the last 2 games. I can show you the stats. One of the things that statisticians and the data guys will tell you is that football is a game really of fine margins. It's probably, I think it's the lowest scoring sport in the world, and as a consequence it is. So if, where we hit a post, and what the stats show is that we've actually improved over the last 10 games, and we're consistently one of the highest teams in terms of scoring, producing chances. But one of the, if in the last 2 games, what was it? We hit the bar and the post and the bar. If they go in, it's a matter of inches and the game changes. So at this point in time, I think that what we have to do is to once again be patient. We're 4 games off the playoffs. We have a stronger squad than we had at the start of the window, and we need to see if the players can bed in. So that's where that is at this point in time. The first person to know, whether or not the manager's going will be the manager. So, with all due respect, I can't really say any more about that at this point in time.
Okay, next question. This is from Adam Miller and Roy McDonald, who both asked similar questions about developing players, whether we have plans to have a B team and why we send them out on loan rather than keeping them here.
Yeah, it's quite simple. That is a function of cash. We haven't got the ability to have a squad that will give us sufficient to have a B team at this point in time, and that's because we focus more on getting quality into the first team. With regard to players out on loan, there are 3 things. There's recruitment, there's development, and there's management. And the development side is something that we are trying to develop. And one of the things that we have with development and development plus players, as we call them, is we stick them out on loan. As soon as we leave the cup competitions, which is a good and useful opportunity for them to play, and before I forget, I hope I'll say something about the Papa John Trophy at the end, if you remind me. That's always useful for them, but failing that, we put them out on loan. Last year we had 4.6 thousand minutes of players being out on loan. So far this year We've got 4,200 already. We've only got 40% of the season, and we've got 6 players out on loan currently. It is a positive movement. I mean, Hockenhull, I was talking to Mickey about Hockenhull, and he said he's come back, and since the start of the season, he's become a man basically, and he's improved immensely. You see, Charlie Jolly went out last year to Chester, did well. Reece Hughes is doing well at Chester. The players who have gone out have all come back, and this isn't just fire and forget. They go out, we keep in touch, they keep training with us, etc. So we're really on top of their development. They all have development plans. So it isn't ideal. I would prefer them to have a regular way of playing in a league, but that isn't the case at this point in time. People like Brentford have got the cash to do it, but they'll take their players and they'll go and play teams like Real Madrid and Barcelona. We can't do that at this point in time, but that's just where it is. We'll still focus on the first team until we get to the point whereby we can afford to have a B team.
Okay, next question. This one was asked by a number of people. Are you happy with the recruitment business this year, both in the summer and in January?
Yeah, I think it was a massive improvement on what we've done in the past. Yes, there are some players who are not really performing. As I said, some of the players that we signed were signed because of the state of where we sit in the scheme of things. We were late, but you look at what we signed up late. Something like Turnbull was a great signing. Simu was a good signing. Unfortunately, he was on loan, and you can't rely on loan players, particularly for the majority of your squad. They can enhance. But in terms of where we are, yes. Can we improve? Yes, you can always improve. What you probably don't know is I think I'm right in saying we're the only League One or League Two club that uses the data that we use, which has enabled us to do things like find the likes of Bristow, etc. And we've got McCreel, who we think is a really, really good analyst of data, and he helps with that. And also Ollie, who's become sort of chief scout. And we also have the assistance of consultants who will give us advice in the market as well. So we spend a lot of time and energy on that, and we're already looking at what we need for next season. So, yes, I think the recruitment process is better. Were there some ones which didn't quite work out? Yes, but then I think we will see what we saw in the window was a strengthening of and a rectification of the balance in the squad. Because again, if you've got young lads, if you've got too many young lads who are all learning the game, then you have a bit of a problem. The guys that we brought in tended to have more experience, but actually their age levels were good as well. So it hasn't massively increased the age of the squad, as was done in previous times. But it's an art, not a science, and it depends on the circumstances. Injuries, for example, Charlie Jolly injured in the first sort of half of the first pre-season game behind closed doors was a massive blow to us, because we hoped he'd move on, and it's part of the reason that again today we've just announced that we've signed an extension to his contract, as he's worked very hard at what he's been doing. So it's I think, like you said, at times, you're not playing Football Manager when you can put it all together at the start of a season and just go with it. You have to work at it, and you have to work at it through the season as well, and you'll make some mistakes.
I don't know if you wanted to mention some of the strikers we did try and get in January and missed out on.
It's worthwhile. We tried to get strikers in the summer, so 4 on the last day of the window. We just sat there and the window shut, and they couldn't get players in, so we couldn't take them off them. This time, I'll tell you now, we tried for Jamil Matt and we tried for Matthew Stevens. It wasn't a question of money. There were other players as well. It wasn't a question of money. We made a bid for a player from Ireland. He went to League One, and you've got to take that into account. There are other things other than money that make players move. So, for example, Jamil Matt is a Birmingham lad. He went to Walsall. Matthew Stevens came up. Northampton were after him. We were after him. We got a good relationship with Big Dunk in Forest Green, but the player wanted to go to Walsall to join up with his mate from previous days at Forest Green. So those are the types of things that really make it difficult to bring players in, and let's face it, everybody's always looking for strikers.
Okay, next question, because I think You've probably answered question 4. Question 5 around the why no replacement for James Vaughan or no director of football replacement, and do we plan to in the future?
You've got to have the right person in as director of football or sporting director, and Vaughan was an ideal person for us. He knew the club, he knew what it was about, and you know, I liked the way he carried himself, etc. And also with the guys that we've got at this point in time, I think we've adequately covered, and I think the proof of the pudding is in the window that we had, which I think everybody except probably Paul and his mates will say was a good window.
There's a question around what happened. Well, there's a number of questions that I've lumped together here because they're all essentially getting at the same thing. Bob Allen asking what happened to the pre-season talk of goals, goals, goals. Several fans saying, do you agree that the style of football we are playing is boring? And Philip Shaw, where is the attacking football we were promised in the close season? All I see is the same old from last season, bomb up the wings and cross into the box, nothing through the middle.
I mean, beauty's in the eye of the beholder. I think we are playing further up the pitch, which is what we wanted to do. The goals was just one of those things where somebody asked me, what do we want to see more of? And what are the 3 things that you want? And I said,
that
goals.
We need to improve on.
Yeah. And I said, goals. And that was that. It wasn't actually saying that's what you're definitely going to get. It's what we wanted. And, you know, that's what we're trying to get. We're trying to get strikers. Yes, but, you know, if you're looking at the creativity of the team, all the stats show that we're one of the most creative teams in the country. So what do you want in terms of attacking football? And actually what's happened in the window, you know, we brought in players such as Walker, but Henry. I mean, Henry's, you know, up and ready and match fit. And you saw with him, I think, even in the games that we lost and the period that he came on at Stockport, that there's a player who, you know, plays forward and plays attacking and football. And he's got a lot more creativity in them than we've seen in the squad. So, you know, the answer is that I think we are more of an attacking team than we were. Yes, we do create more chances than most. I forget what the stats had.
17 shots a game, 5 on target from the last 3 that we've lost. So we've excluded the ones that we've won.
Yeah, so, you know, the last 3 games where we've lost, we've actually had 17 shots on average on, and how many on target? 5 or 6?
5, yeah.
And if you go around and find, you know, other teams, I mean, if you're looking at the other teams, you will find that we're in the top 4 or 5 on that. Could have been, I think, 4th. I think we were last time I looked at it in the league. So if that's not attacking football, you know, it's just, as I say, beauty's in the eye of the beholder. But I think, you know, if you look back to 3 games ago and we played Leyton Orient, everybody was saying what a fantastic game of football that was. And so, yeah.
Okay, moving on, a question from Martin Ellis, which is one I can take, which is about, do we have a break-even figure for home attendances? Rumour has it at 6,500. I'm concerned that if we're losing fans and the decline continues, the loss of revenue will seriously impact the budget for next season. It depends on what the question means. If the question is what gate do we need to cover the operating costs of a single match, then it's actually very low. It's around 1,000 fans. I think the Bolton Papa John's game was the first time we'd actually made a small profit on a Papa John's qualifying round game. But if you mean what gates would we need on average to break even for the whole season, so that's taking into account all of the staff salaries and player costs, etc. The answer is around between 10 and 11,000. So we're miles off that at the moment, and that's why the other commercial revenues are so important to grow. You know, I don't think we're likely to get anywhere close to 10 to 11,000 gates on a consistent basis until we're higher up the league. So we've got to get the commercial revenues in to fill the gap, to make sure that we do continue to have a competitive playing budget, because that's what we've always stated is our aim. We've then got a question from David Crosswaite about the ownership of the club, who owns it or part owns it. It says the question comes from a previous reference made by the club to us being part owners. what is the nature of the relationship with Santini? Do we owe them any money? If so, how do we intend to pay that back? And would that be by a sale of Prenton Park? A lot of questions in there. The comment about Mark and I being part owners of the club was simply because I felt it was a bit disrespectful to our Indonesian investors just to say we were the owners and completely ignore them. The current shareholdings are Mark and I have just under 75%. The Santini Group have just under 24%, and about 900 other shareholders between them have roughly 1.5%. So that's broadly where we are. They invested in the club after coming across to the work that the international team was doing out in Indonesia. And all of their money has gone into the club as equity, not as debt. So the club has no debt to repay to them at all. So the question about would that be by the sale of Prenton Park is not relevant. So I hope that clears that up.
I think just one thing I'd say is, part and parcel of the way I do turnarounds is you create a breathing space, extract the organic potential, and then get a capital transaction. And that third element is not to be dismissed. So why did somebody from the other side of the planet feel comfortable investing in a minority investment, but significant, into a lower league football club? And the answer is that's because they understand that, where we are and what we're trying to do and how we're trying to do it. So that's in terms of the relationship with them, they're pretty much passive in that regard. They've invested now close to what we originally agreed that they would put in. So we constantly look for more equity, and we'll continue to do that. But it goes in as equity, that's the point. We dilute our shareholding and the money comes into the club.
The next question is from Kenny Clark. Do you think without a new stadium and the anticipated growth of off-field income that would come with that, we are likely a middle League 2 club?
I think I answered this several AGMs ago. It could have been 2019, 2018. I forget when I first addressed it. And I showed the figures and the likely projections if you go up the leagues, etc. And to become a self-sustainable championship club, we needed to do a few things, which included starting to play a trade better, getting the campus expansion project done, and also potentially a new stadium. If a new stadium works, that was the thing that would take us across from being a League One club into a championship club on a self-sustainable basis. And that's subject to any structural change in the industry which may come about as a consequence of the independent regulator. And what I would say is I do my best on that. I talk to the DCMS on a reasonably regular basis about what should and shouldn't be done. But actually, in terms of the, I'll just touch on the stadium now because that's the one about the championship club. The feasibility study is just stalled at this point in time whilst we work with the council to try and get the extension to the campus out. But as everyone knows, the ability to get a decision from the council just at this point in time is difficult. They've got all-out elections which are causing the politicians to be looking at May. And also there has been a change in terms of the executives in there, so we have to sort of re-educate them as to the merits of the proposal we've got for the campus. So at this point in time, we look to the campus project as the next step. And as we said before, in terms of a new stadium, there really is no debate on that's feasible or sensible with the fans at this point in time until we understand whether it's feasible or not. And that feasibility study has to be carried out, and it hasn't moved on since the last Q&A, and that's because we haven't got the bandwidth either in the council or ourselves to actually push that forward at this point.
There's one related question that I just saw coming up on the screen there from Stephen Clayton, which is, do we own the campus? The answer is we have a 100-year lease on the campus, so technically no, but to all intents and purposes, yes. Yeah, it's. I mean, when I came, and I talked briefly at the start of this about the contract that the club had signed as regards the sale of Ingleborough and what they were trying to do at the campus. They were looking to get a 25-year lease, which was nonsense in the context of where we are. So this becomes more like a freehold, and we had I think we got about 95 years, 93 years left on it. And if we do a rejig of the campus, we'll try and
extend that lease even further. So effectively, you know, if you look at somebody like Charlton, and they've just sold the club, Charlton, I think they've sold it for about £10 million. They don't own their own ground. They don't own their own training ground, and they play in League One. And, you know, we're sitting here and we do own our own ground, and we do own our own training ground.
There's a question that's coming through about what is the campus project, which is one that I thought we had explained before, but clearly not everybody knows. I suggest maybe, because that's quite a complex one, we'll do a note to fans on that so that they understand what that's all about afterwards, for those who don't. Moving on to another one. This was an anonymous. It was a comment rather than a question, but I'm going to take it as if it was a question. The comment was, "It feels like there has been no progress on or off the pitch since the two of you came in." And look, I get why everybody is feeling a bit deflated at the moment, because we are not higher up the division than we wanted to be, and everybody's feeling a bit miserable at the moment because of everything else that's going on in the outside world. But can we just stand back for a moment and actually look what has been achieved over that period of time? Because I think, you know, it's easy to forget it. We take stuff for granted. First of all, we have a playing budget that is about 2.5 times the size that we inherited. There have been a lot of improvements made to the stadium, around 6,000 new seats. All of the hospitality lounges in the main stand were revamped. We've got a brand new hybrid pitch, which is probably the best in our division. We had a fan park for the first time, and soon to be an even bigger and better one, thanks to the efforts of the Trust. Incidentally, because I saw some questions asking for an update on that, the orders are all in for the structure. It should be delivered, I think, in about 8 weeks' time, and construction should start pretty immediately thereafter. The reason for the delays was endless planning delays. They were huge amounts of detail that they wouldn't let us start going ahead until we'd shown them the designs of the bicycle racks and all sorts. So just carrying on the stadium improvements, we put the disabled lift in, we put the disabled shelters in, and additional seating there. We've invested £4 million in the training ground complex, which obviously now has a full-size 3G as well as the 4 grass pitches there. Bear in mind, when we came, the training ground was a couple of fields that we had on a short-term lease and a porter cabin out at Raby. We've now got a complex that, you know, some people may criticise, but it's got about 10 changing rooms. It's got an enormous state-of-the-art gym in there. It's got hydrotherapy facilities. It's got, you know, everything that you could want of a professional football club training ground. We've developed new commercial income streams. The international business, just to give you an idea on that, we've got around 1,000 paying visitors coming between now and the end of March this year. And that's off the back of 2 years where we effectively couldn't do anything much with the international business because of COVID. The esports bit that we get quite a lot of stick for, we sent a proposal out yesterday for several £1,000s to a pro esports kit team who want to come and do a boot camp there. There's enormous potential for that business. It's one of the fastest growing industries in the world. As I say, I get that fans of traditional football may not be interested in esports, but that's kind of missing the point. It's about getting commercial revenue streams that will underpin the club in the long term. We've also built the education business from scratch. We have had a huge increase in the community outreach. We established the TROSC, which has, you know, been thriving. We've built a strong working relationship with both the Trust and the TROSC, and I think the development of the fan park that's about to start is a great example of what we can achieve working together. And we've also had 2 promotions and 4 trips to Wembley in that time. So I do get why people are, you know, disappointed with where we are at the moment this season. But it is this constant need to balance the short term with the long term, and the long term for the good of the club. And I think there has been a heck of a lot achieved over that time in terms of the long term stability of the club. Question for you, Mark, around the fan park, seeing as we've sort of touched on that. Will the club benefit financially from the new fan park?
The answer to that is hopefully there's a rent that's been agreed with the relevant parties. Then the supporters trust then takes an equivalent amount off the next tranche, and then it's a question of a profit share after that. There's dangers and risks for us in doing it, in the basis that it could cannibalise the F&B that we would normally have around the stadium on a match day if they all go through there. But at the end of the day, on balance, I think it was a thing that improved what we did when we first came, which was to agree with the trust that they could put a fan park on the car park, the director's car park. So I think that from that perspective, it's a sensible thing to do.
Got a question from John Redgrift. Are there any plans to stop selling the programmes, and if so, what would be available to us? We're actually hoping to have an intern working with us very imminently to do a bit of fan consultation and research on this. We've got to a position where the sales of programmes, like almost every club, are declining in hard copy. It's still just about breaks even for us, but we're having the debate about whether we would be better moving to a digital model. If we do move to a digital model, would it better to make it free for people to read so that it gets a bigger circulation and is therefore more useful for sponsors, for example, who want to advertise in it? Or whether we do something completely different and say go digital but have a monthly magazine or an annual yearbook that covers all of the fixtures and who was playing and what the results were. So that's something that you can expect to get sounded out about fairly imminently.
Can I just take one? I just seen one come through from Sheldon Evans. He says, "Where's the doing money, Palios?" Were you listening, Evans?
Yeah.
All the money that we got from selling players net that we spent on other players that we brought in went into the playing budget.
Question from Thomas Raybould. Is there any truth in the rumoured pre-season trip to Indonesia?
No, but actually what we are looking at is potentially a pre-season trip to Ireland. But there'll be more of that later before people get too excited about that. It's only just come up during the course of the last week, and there's lots of things to put together before we actually decide to go ahead with that.
One that I've seen coming through on the screen, Mark, that you might want to talk about is what's your view on the football regulator? And I think associated with that, just a couple of minutes on the changes that are likely to come down in terms of the way that the EFL and the EPL regulate the game.
I've done quite a bit on this, and I've spoken to the DCMS, and I've got a quote ready for when the white paper comes out. My view on it is it's the first step. At least the government didn't walk it away. I think Tracy Crouch was in danger of walking it into the long grass, which is exactly what the Premier League and the EFL want. My big thing is that they should be looking at the strategic issues, not necessarily diving into the details. So it's about making sure that clubs can exist, not in the hand-to-mouth environment we've got at the moment. So, I'm talking to you about the balance between long and short term. We're talking to you about making sure that we try and get as competitive a budget on the pitch as we then want to also try and build the business off the pitch. Now, that isn't possible most of the time because of the wage inflation that's around, and clubs can get financial doping. They can put their hands in a pocket and for a period of time they'll fund the playing budget, which keeps it taking as much money as you get in. My major concern is that any money that comes down, any increased money that comes down, immediately goes out through wage inflation, which will happen. And that's why I'm saying that this is the first start. The regulator has to have the powers to really sort of have a look at that and stop that happening going forwards. One big thing that I've said to the DCMS, and that is that the EFL should run its league and commercialise it. It doesn't represent me, it doesn't represent my club, it doesn't represent any of the clubs beneath the Championship as far as I'm concerned, because they're scared of the Championship running away into becoming the second division of the EFL. Now, if you then start to say, well, actually the main thing is to protect the pyramid, and therefore you protect the gaps between the various leagues in the pyramid, it doesn't really matter if the Championship becomes the second division of the Premier League, on the basis that if the gap between League One, what is now League One, and what is now the Championship is fixed, then you can just slip from one competition into the next. And that's what's happened between the Championship and the Premiership to some extent, although it's getting stretched now because of what's been going on right at the top of the Premiership. So I think that it's a step in the right direction. At least it wasn't marched into the long grass like in the last 50 years we've seen it happening. But you've just got to keep on top of it and keep on top of the regulator to make sure that he represents everybody. Because at this point in time, with the EFL representing us, supposedly, nobody asked them to, as far as I'm concerned. Nobody asked them to. And the owners of lower league clubs are not properly represented. Now, people talk about governance and good governance. Well, governance is about all stakeholders feeling that they are confident in the decision-making process. You did ask this. Well, the answer is I'm not confident. And I think that in the EFL representing us, and I actually think that where the regulator possibly, the DCMS have possibly given too much store to allowing the EFL to represent our interests, because I don't think it does. Anything that needs to be agreed of material content in the EFL has to have the sanction of the Championship clubs, and that means that if you're sharing things out, who's going to get the lion's share?
You said you wanted to say something about the Papa John's.
Yeah, I just, we had a live Q&A, and I remember asking a guy said, why didn't it go to the Papa John's? And they sort of said, well, you don't like it. And there's this thing about the Papa John's that people say, well, it's the thin end of the wedge. Well, it won't be as long as I'm trying to fight for it. But the issue for me is that potentially, that competition, I think when we got to the final, we made about £300,000 on it. Now, that would go into the playing budget. So why don't the fans support the Papa John's? And I can already hear the screams and shouts, but that's the reality of it. If you supported that particular competition, then, we potentially would put another 2 or 3 players in the squad.
We've got a question about any chance of the futsal team coming back. I think I'll probably take that one. So futsal in the club generally is getting back on track after obviously it was all forced to stop over COVID. We've now got leagues for, I think it's mostly for kids running on Mondays and Tuesdays. The rec centre is used for netball on Wednesdays and Thursdays. So we have limited space available. It's a nice problem to have because it's booked out most of the time. The reason that we stopped having the top level futsal team was simply because the FA messed around with it so many times, and having invested in a facility which was designed to be exactly what they specified was required for competing at the top level in futsal, they then the next season changed the rules and said the runoff was a metre too short. So at that point, we stopped having the top level team. A couple of people have asked about whether we can revive some of the adult teams. Certainly if there is an appetite to play on Fridays or any time over the weekends, we would have the capacity to do that. So that's something that we can have a look at. Finally, there's a question from Chris Stevenson, which is Mark's age now starts with a 7. So I wonder if he has an exit strategy sometime with succession planning for the club. We all know that the future is perilous for smaller clubs, and I'm sure he wants his legacy to be a great one.
The answer is, and Paul will be very pleased about this, the answer is yes, I do have an exit strategy, and tomorrow we'll be announcing that we're leaving the club. No, I don't have an exit strategy as it happens, and the exit strategy, you'll bore you to death with it, but I'll just read it out from my notes, which weren't done for the purposes of this, because I didn't know that was going to be a question, but I actually do have a note, which if you want to listen to it, The requirement is to establish 1, a management team and structure capable of carrying the club forward. 2, a share structure that has fan representation but also private ownership that is committed to the area, community and sufficient resources to enable the club to fulfil its potential. 3, the basic components are an executive board, associate directors that contribute, a strong senior management team and support function infrastructure, comprehensive systems to allow timely database decisions, strong and identifiable culture, better never sleeps, cross-silo working, quality first, welcoming, etc. 4, a strong balance sheet characterised by reserves, reduced debt and assets that produce income which is agnostic as regards pitch performance. 5, robust football processes recognising the relative importance of recruitment 70%, development 20%, management plus or minus 10%. Key projects to achieve this: campus expansion, football processes, new stadium ? Subject to feasibility study, equity injection and Project Trojan, which is the exit strategy. And that's subject to my health. We're 2 years behind where we wanted to be because of COVID, etc. and the 3 years in the non-league. And I guess the other thing is, what I was saying before, also trying to influence the DCMS and the structure of the industry so that it's actually a bit more beneficial as regards lower league clubs. But yes, there's an exit strategy in place and it's doing what we will do. But as Nicky said, if the day comes when somebody comes knocking on our door, and unfortunately there aren't many Hollywood stars who would come and do that, and if you can find a billionaire who wants to come in and do some stuff, then fine. But yes, if we feel that, just to repeat what Nicky says, if we feel that there is somebody out there who can take the club forward, but take it forward in a way that doesn't sort of undo the work that we've done so far, although some people may be disparaging about that and say we haven't gone anywhere and done anything. But if we can find somebody who can do that and we are comfortable that they are the right person to take this club forward, then that's what we'll do. In the meantime, there's a job to be done and we'll keep on pushing forward on that. We'll keep on getting the balance right, we hope, between long term and short term. We'll try to make it better on the pitch. Yes, we are disappointed as to where we are this season. But again, looking back over the seasons, we've always had something to play for. And this season we still have something to play for, which is an important point out. We're 4 points off the playoffs. And I think it's important that the fans really do what they have done in the past. I remember when we went down at Plymouth and we went to see the away fans, and it always gives me great pride to see our away fans, and I'm proud of them. But we went there and I remember coming back to my seat and saying to Nicky, look, we'll be all right. But the key point is you stay together. Times are difficult, but actually at the end of the day, we are where we are. Success is never permanent. Failure is never fatal. It's having the courage to continue that counts. And that was Winston Churchill saying that, not me. But the issue here is that we need to understand that there is really an opportunity to keep this club going forwards, both on and off the pitch. And as to say, we've got a better squad. And I would like to see us actually sort of really start to see that gel in the near future and improve the results on the pitch. And I say it's fine margins, but we've got to continue.
And that, I think, brings us pretty close to the end of the hour that we had allotted for this. Just one thing, if I could remind people of, in case they've forgotten, tomorrow is the match that Sands is doing in conjunction, in memory of Nate Gidman, with Phil involved in the organisation of that, and also raising some money for our steward who very tragically lost his partner and his baby a couple of weeks ago. So if anybody can get down and support that, please do. Mark and I will be there, so if people have got other questions they want to ask, then we will be there tomorrow. This video will get uploaded to YouTube, so if anybody who missed the stuff at the beginning where we were talking about the football side, or if you missed any of it or just want to hear it again, or point people who couldn't make it to it, then that's where it will be. Thank you very much for dialing in. I hope that has been useful, and as ever, other than the emails from a certain individual at 10:30 at night. If there are any questions that you want to ask us, then use the tell us at email address.
Yeah, just to reiterate that, thanks very much everybody. Thanks for your support. Thanks for your support over the time we've been here, and you know, it is very good of you to you know, to take the trouble at times to remind us that it is a minority that sort of feel that the right to an opinion is a right to abuse. But thank you.